Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. We are kicking it old school, coming to you live on a Monday. It is graduation week for a lot of folks, including Dennis and I, where both of us have school-related events coming up this week. So we thought we'd pop on tonight and look at the AFC running backs. Dennis, are you as excited as your kids that it's soon to be summer vacation?
Man, Cole has 9 more days of school, and I don't think he's been present for 6 of the last 7 days. I mean, he's been there, but his mind is, he's been out of school. Luckily, Caleb is out. We got a kid staying with us. He's a senior. He goes to a charter school for half a day, an art school, and then he goes to a public high school. And tomorrow night is his charter school graduation. So we're excited for him. He got accepted into the Cleveland State University music program, and so we're looking forward to getting his regular graduation is on Sunday. They got a show in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Saturday. It's a busy ass week, man. Busy week.
Well, it wasn't a busy weekend in terms of NFL news. There's starting to be some kind of pop-ups and camp rumors, nothing that seemed too significant. But one player did announce their retirement, and honestly, Dennis, I didn't realize he had not officially retired, and that is David Johnson. Came out, said he didn't get any offers during the 2023 season, obviously wasn't there for that, and hasn't gotten any offers this offseason, so it seemed like it was time to hang it up. He is a guy, felt like his star burned bright, but burned for just a short amount of time there with the Cardinals. How will you remember David Johnson?
He's going to be remembered as a guy who broke my heart. I fell in love during his mercurial season, and then by the time I could get him rostered, he got his wrist broke all to hell and had all these different things happen. He had a great season, a good season, and then, to be honest, did you really retire if, it's the old Bobcat Goldthwait joke. I didn't quit, but I went to work and somebody else was doing my job. I'm paraphrasing, but.
Yeah, I think it's just like officially hanging it up. I think they have to officially submit, not that necessarily Johnson will make the Hall of Fame, but you have to officially submit your retirement papers so that you can start getting pension benefits, I think, in the NFL. So that might have had more to do with it. Yeah. 6,876 yards from scrimmage, 58 touchdowns in 8 seasons. I think, probably half of that came in 1 or 2 good years for the Cardinals. I'm like you, it felt like hope sprung eternal with David Johnson for like 3 or 4 years. This is the year he's going to be back. This is the year. And just couldn't stay healthy, couldn't get it going again. But he was great for a couple of years there with Arizona.
Phenomenal. I mean, he was big. He was 6'1", 230 pound, 225 pounder. Could catch the ball out of the backfield really good. Athletic. It was a damn shame.
Well, that's a good segue. We are continuing our unit grades, and you know what? We are up to running backs that have a home in the AFC conference. So we will be taking a look at the AFC group today. As we do this, we look not only at the top line starter, but the depth. We'll go 16-1. Dennis, I will let you kick it off. Who is number 16 in your AFC group?
I got to be honest. There's a few teams on this list that probably could stand to give David Johnson a call. I mean, just putting it out there.
Especially in the AFC, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of depth.
Yeah, the AFC is a hot mess. I've got the Raiders at 16. Zamir White came on at the end of last year. They brought in Alexander Madison. I don't expect much out of Madison. Amir Abdullah he's mostly a special teamer, occasional passing down work. I'm not sold on Dylan Laube or Dylan Laub, however you pronounce his last name. Not good enough for me to have figured out how to pronounce it yet, I guess. Watch him go show me wrong this year. But White is he feels like a Jag. I think he's going to get by on volume this year. Hopefully he doesn't the finding hands don't lead to fumble issues. And their quarterback issues, with having they're duking it out between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, which could really make for a difficult sledding for Zamir White. They could stack the box up against him. And, I don't know. I know he looked good with Aiden O'Connell in there last year, so there is a glimmer of hope. But there's no real depth on this team for fantasy. I think if you could get White as your RB3, then I think you're like, oh, I can live with this. You're probably going to have to get him, though, somewhere around RB20 or RB18 if you want to get him, because people are going to get desperate and they'll start to reach when you're doing your draft. So I've got the Raiders at 18. They've got a Jag on the top of the depth.
They're so bad you dropped them to two below the teams.
That's right.
I'm not much higher on the Raiders than you. I have them at 15. Amir Abdullah's in there. He's done some things. He's probably more of a special team player right now. But I liked their combination and potential depth a little bit better than the team I dropped to 16, which is the Cincinnati Bengals. And, I know Zach Moss was a godsend at the beginning of last year with the Colts, but it's hard to forget the first few years of his career where he essentially did nothing but disappoint in Buffalo. And then he only, he burned brightly for a few games there. Jonathan Taylor came back, so you didn't expect necessarily to take over, but we haven't exactly seen him dominate for a full season. And I remember how much I enjoyed the sample of Chase Brown we got last year. But if you go back and look at the actual numbers he put up, it was really just a sample. It was like a couple of games where he showed a couple of moments. And beyond that is all kind of guys that they've drafted that we've never seen really do anything. Travion Williams, you have Chris Evans. I like the potential of the room because we saw Joe Mixon be a top 10 running back there, but are these guys capable of churning out that volume and performance? Maybe, but we don't know. I think Zamir White had just as good of a sample last year, probably in the time that he filled in for Josh Jacobs for quite a few weeks at the end of the season, as what Zach Moss did in his kind of stint with the Colts. And Madison, we've seen him be a veteran who's contributed before. And, I liked the potential of some of the other ones. It's not like a huge call for me, but those are the ones that I had at the bottom. Pretty close for me at 14 was the Chargers, which I know you have at 15. I'm just going to say I like the top end potential of Dobbins and Edwards, plus kind of some of the depth pieces that they have in their possible potential and the running scheme that they have a little bit more than the guys below them. But I'm not wild about any of those three rooms, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, so I've got the Chargers at 15. I love J.K. Dobbins. He's a Buckeye. There's no reason on God's green earth that J.K. Dobbins should be sitting at the top of the depth chart.
Well, I think it's really going to be Gus. I think it's just our lads making their. I mean, don't you think Gus is probably the guy that gets the lion's share of the carries there?
I don't know. I mean, it's it feels like it should be, but I don't know what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. And was he just doing John a solid by bringing in a couple ex-Ravens and
I
giving
don't
them?
know if it's doing John a solid so much as their offensive coordinator who was there with the Ravens. So it might be just getting him his guys that he wanted.
I don't mind. The Chargers, they drafted Kamani Vidal. He in the 6th round. We've seen later round running backs pop off. I'm not sold on any of these guys being much more than somewhere between 24 and 30 if they get the volume. And it feels like they're not going to get the volume. And then I've got Cincinnati. I just liked what I got them at 14. I get your argument about Zach Moss, but I feel like the one of the big opportunities is that Joe Burrow in that passing game can ease up the line of scrimmage and give Zach Moss some room to operate. And then we got a chance to see Chase Brown be very, very explosive. So, well, I don't know. I'm not comfortable saying either one of them have real high ceilings. You could end up with Moss. He could end up getting a bunch of short yardage touchdowns and rushing for 800 yards. Chase Brown could all of a sudden overtake him because of his explosiveness. And he's not a little guy. Well, he's short. He's 5'9", but he weighs almost 210 pounds, and he's got good explosiveness. I have the Bengals above the Chargers, honestly, because they've got a young guy that they like a lot, and that's Chase Brown.
Yeah, and Brown's 5'9", 215. But let me ask you this. What do you think his stats were? I'll be honest, I'm only asking you because it was sort of a borderline made me go, huh? Because I remember it felt like he had like 3 or 4 explosive games down the stretch. But what do you think, if you had to hazard a guess, how many total yards do you think he put up as a rookie?
Oh, I think in rush from scrimmage or rushing?
Yeah, rushing and receiving.
I think he probably was around 200, 250.
Oh, so you're a little low, actually. But in 12 games, he appeared, had 44 carries, 179 yards, averaged 4.1, saw 15 targets, caught 14 for 156 and a touchdown. So, I mean,
he had more. He didn't have explosive games. He had explosive plays.
Yeah.
It took him a while to earn opportunity. And then even when he didn't, with Mixon there, he wasn't earning a lot of opportunity. So he made it count when he had a chance.
I want to come back real quick to Kamani Vidal. I don't know about you, but I feel like he's starting to get really overdrafted in rookie drafts. I've seen him go as early as the 2nd round now.
I think that's a function of, people looking at Marshawn Lloyd landing behind Josh Jacobs and Jalen, is it right, that landed in Miami behind Achane and Mostert, and Corum behind Kyron Williams. I don't see it with Vidal myself. I think he's got every opportunity to be, Gus Edwards or, one of these guys that if he lands in the perfect system for him, he can be productive, but he's really just a placeholder.
Well, it wasn't like they took him particularly early either. Like I think had the Chargers taken a running back decently high, people were going to be interested because it felt like a wide open room. But I'm trying to go look at him now. I think he was like 6th.
He was the 6th rounder.
Yeah, so I don't think that's even in a kind of compressed and depressed running back situation in the draft. It didn't feel particularly high. And in the first few rookie drafts I did, he went like in the fourth round or undrafted. But it feels like it's just steadily climbing up. And I don't know if it's people feeling hopeful or wishful, but
Well, I mean, often you're looking at a path to opportunity, and Gus is nothing special, and Dobbins is never healthy, so there you can make a case that there's a path.
you and I have the same team at 13, and that is the New England Patriots. They have Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson kind of came over there. Kevin Harris, JaMychal Hasty, probably a little bit of depth pieces. For me, they rise above this pack because I like Ramondre Stevenson better than any of the backs on any of the teams below them. I wouldn't say this is a great room, but it feels much like how I felt about the Patriots quarterback room. You sit there and they're not particularly high, but they're higher than you might have thought they would end up. And you're like, I guess the AFC sucks.
Well, with Ramondre Stevenson, he has bell cow back potential. He's big, he's strong, he can catch the ball, he's an effective runner. I think we've seen, like, was it his rookie year, maybe his second year, he wore down, and that felt like that was a function of, I think it was his rookie year, so I think it was more a function of how to manage playing 17 games. And so
and then he was killer in 2022. It's just last year he got hurt.
And so there's to me, I struggled with putting them behind Kansas City because I like Stevenson so much better than Isaiah Pacheco. And honestly, I probably should have moved him up at least one more spot when I was tinkering. But, I've got him here at 13. I didn't put a designation like I did up at the 1 and 2 spot. So we'll leave him sitting at 13. The show is Ramondre Stevenson there. I don't think Antonio Gibson is going to provide a big threat. He'll take some receiving work. Gibson doesn't have much vision when it comes to running inside. I think Ramondre, he caught like 70 passes a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, and that's the part that from a fantasy perspective, I worry a little bit about because Antonio Gibson, you would figure, came in to kind of be like a James White type pass catching back. And a lot of Ramondre Stevenson's, fantasy value in 2022 had to do with he was like their best passing game asset, and he was a pounder on the ground.
I probably would expect somewhere between 40 and 50 receptions still, even with Gibson. You're not going to just take him off the field because he is good at it. Gibson will get some run, but I don't think he's going to get swapped out quite as much as some others may think.
And so you referenced, we both have the Chiefs at 12. Isaiah Pacheco, he's been good at what he's done for them the past 2 years. Rock solid there. They brought back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, kind of an interesting. But beyond that, they don't have a lot in that room. Maybe Keontae Ingram turns into something. Maybe Deneric Prince turns into something. But a lot of questions back there. So not an incredible ton of depth. I do like Pacheco. I maybe like him a little more than you do. Helaire is a veteran backup. It was hard. You're right. But between the Chiefs and the Patriots, it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of sizzle in that choice. There was a lot of more.
This feels like a spot where a veteran that gets cut is going to land and immediately slot in ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I like Pacheco just fine. He just doesn't get the work for fantasy. I think he was RB 14 last year, which is great. But now they've beefed up their receiving core. And I think that if he has one saving grace this year, it's that they don't bring somebody in as a passing back, and he's able to get a little more passing down work. I saw it described on Twitter that, he runs like he's angry at the earth, the way he stomps his feet when he runs. But that also, he's not, he seeks out contact like he's built like Derrick Henry. I mean, even Derrick Henry avoids contact when he can. And Pacheco just kind of likes to ram into people.
Pacheco was RB 15 overall, RB 14 on a points per game basis. Did miss a couple of games due to injury, but you could probably say that about a lot of running backs.
I do know last year when Deneric Prince came out, Garrett Price of Dynasty Nerds in the Nerd Score, which has been an effective fantasy evaluation tool, rated Deneric Prince as his best pass blocking back. So potentially he may move up. He's a decent enough runner, I think, but he could get some passing down work. A lot of people have been high on Imani Bailey out of TCU, I think. I'm not terribly high on Bailey. Yeah, he looks like he's a good pass catcher, but he's like 5'8" and 195 pounds, and he ran like a 4.6. None of those things say to me, we got to get this guy on the field. So
no,
they've got a 7th rounder that starts in Pacheco, a 1st rounder that's a career backup, and everybody else are street free agents and college free agents.
But, Andy Reid has been good at finding guys in the past. As you mentioned, Pacheco is the 7th round pick that coming out, I feel like if I remember right, he kind of took off during training camp and in preseason when people got to see him run. So we both have the same team at number 11, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. They made a big free agent signing to get Derrick Henry. I love Henry, but he's an older back, and he's had some injuries and some struggles in the last couple of years, but still pretty rock solid. It's behind him where I start to have some questions. We like the flashes we saw of Keaton Mitchell, but he was a late season injury. A lot of talk that he's not going to be kind of ready at the beginning of the season. You have Justice Hill, who has struggled with his own injuries. They took Rasheen Ali, I can't remember if he was undrafted or went in the 6th or 7th round.
5th rounder.
Okay, so even higher than I remembered, but not a lot of proven commodities behind there. It's kind of Derrick Henry, and Henry not typically a huge part of the passing game. So you figure he's kind of out there just to plod and pound behind that line, which isn't a terrible thing. Of course, Baltimore running backs always run the risk of getting sniped at the goal line by one Lamar Jackson.
And it's fortunate for Henry that just because he's not, a huge asset in the passing game, he fortunately went to the team that probably throws the ball, especially to the running back. So I like the signing of Henry. I think it's going to add a nice RPO. It'll beef up the RPO package that they run. Keaton Mitchell, very explosive. It's easy to fall in love with that. We've seen it with Devin Achane. Justice Hill, he's shown some flashes, just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but they do like him. I think Hill will be their change of pace back until somebody takes that away from him. That could be Rasheen Ali, could be Keaton Mitchell. I have them at 11 because of King Henry. I think he's going to be able to – I think he's got another top 10 season in him, and I think it's going to happen this year.
So you and I have the same 10 and 9, just in a slightly different order, and that is the Buffalo Bills and the Denver Broncos as the two teams. You have Buffalo at 10, Denver at 9. I have Denver at 10 and Buffalo at 9. I guess the difference for me is I like James Cook the best out of all the backs, and I thought Ty Johnson worked for them. I'm excited about the Ray Davis pick. I don't know about Darrington Evans, but I also thought the Frank Gore Jr. pickup was kind of interesting. Denver has a lot of bodies too. Javante, I've loved Javante. I don't know if they're ever going to use him the way we had hoped. It's hard to say whether Samaje Perine, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin all make the roster. They have Tyler Batty. I think they talked Blake Watson up a little bit. I'm pretty sure that guy is a practice squad player. I don't think Denver's going to carry more than 4. They may only carry 3, was what they did last year. I actually think Jaleel McLaughlin could be on the bubble more than people realize as well. But for me, I love James Cook, and I loved his fit in that offense, especially after Dorsey took over. So I had them a slight notch higher at 9. But you like Denver better. So what kind of was the separator for you?
So I just think Javonte Williams is the best back of the between the two teams. I like the talent. I agree with your analysis a little bit, though. I don't know if the game may have passed Sean Payton by. He's I don't know if he's Mike Holmgren it in Cleveland or what's going on, but it feels like he's trying to recreate the Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara with Javonte and Audric Estime.
I think he's literally just waiting for Alvin Kamara's contract to come up in the Saints so he can sign him, because there isn't a Saint that's a free agent that he hasn't brought over so far.
Samaje Perine is okay. He does, he's a decent enough pass protector, but he's not. He isn't powerful when he runs for somebody that's 230 pounds. He's not overly fast. He's serviceable catching the ball. I feel like even though Estime ran a real slow time at 4.7, at 221 pounds, he's more powerful than Perine, and he's capable of catching the ball. Javonte Williams, I think, is a good pass catcher, and he's an effective runner. I think we'll start out seeing Perine with Estime sprinkled in, but I think Estime takes over as their hammerback, by week 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there.
So that's Samaje Perine wasn't the hammerback for Denver, and this is what
I know, but they split it with him and Williams. They didn't really have
no, and this is what made me the most frustrated and concerned. Unless they start to develop more confidence in Williams, the biggest problem for both fantasy and for me sitting there having to watch every snap of every Broncos game was anytime they got down and were coming back or had to go into a hurry-up offense, that's where Samaje Perine was out, because most of the game when they're plodding along, it was some combination of Williams and McLaughlin, who I have to be honest, that was a law of diminishing returns as you got toward the end of the season, and that's why I think he may be more on the bubble than people realize. But I agree with you. I think Javonte Williams is an awesome pass catcher, and I thought he does fine as a blocker, but literally every time they were in kind of like throwing situations or hurry-up situations, Williams and McLaughlin were gone. And that's where Perine was in doing all of his work. And I don't know if they didn't trust those guys for blocking, which is another question I'll have. Usually rookie running backs, one of the things that they struggle with early most is picking up like the blocking schemes. So that's where a lot of people after the Estime pick was made were like, well, they're just going to cut Samaje Perine. I'm not entirely sure that's the case, especially with a rookie quarterback who they're going to want to give the best protection possible. And part of it is because they've never figured out a right tackle situation. I don't think Mike McGlinchey was the answer, but he's still penciled in there. And so I don't know if it's just that was the best blocking situation they could come up with, but that's where Perine was in. And that's why he got some of those sneaky, incredible fantasy games, because he would be in anytime they were coming back or doing a hurry up, and they would just be dumping it off to him for huge chunks of yardage.
Well, I think it's going to be Javonte this year.
I mean, that would be the best, but that requires a level of faith and trust in Sean Payton that I don't currently
How long has
possess.
it been since you believed in a Broncos head coach?
I loved Gary Kubiak. I was thrilled by that hire. I actually was kind of excited when they hired Nathaniel Hackett. I thought that might be good until I watched a couple games, and then that went real quick. I didn't think Vic Fangio was a bad coach. I thought they saddled him with a mediocre to poor team at times. Like he had his quarterback options. That's where player personnel was probably more of an issue there. So
All right.
but
Rough segue. Who you got at 8?
we both have the same team at 8, and that's the Tennessee Titans. They added Tony Pollard to go with Tyjae Spears, which I think is a nice duo at the top. I'll be honest, I forgot Hassan Haskins was still on that team. Maybe he did too. They don't have a ton of depth behind those guys, but I like that 1-2 punch enough to put them 8, which is probably also a commentary on the AFC.
Yeah, it feels – I think they're going to use Pollard a little more in the passing game, like when he was most effective in Dallas, and let Spears run it. I know Pollard is the bigger of the two, but Spears feels like he's the more effective between the tackles runner when you watch him.
Well, that was with Pollard. I think that's where we saw the limitations of Pollard last year as the feature back in Dallas. The year prior, when he was kind of in there for big plays and third downs and pass catching, worked really well, but it was based off Zeke kind of having softened up the front. I would think Tennessee could potentially do the same thing up there. And that's, you seem to think of Spears as a little bit of the pounder too. That's what I think of. I was listening to somebody that was talking about him being their pass catching back, and that, if that's what they're thinking, that makes no sense to me that you would bring Pollard in to be the pounder.
Yeah, I think that Spears has that ability. I just, unless they're going to start to use Haskins as a big back, it doesn't make sense to go that route.
So you and I have the same two teams at 6 and 7, but again in a slightly flipped order, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. I have the Jaguars at 7. They have ATN. I liked what we saw from him last year. They maybe have a little potential. Dearness Johnson, Tank Bigsby. Are we going to see a lot from them? Dearness Johnson, kind of a depth player to me. Tank Bigsby is the real question. Does he get more run? Do we see the potential that he maybe had in drafting? I have Houston higher. I loved the signing of Joe Mixon. Mixon, even though, we talked about him maybe not being quite as efficient, was a top 10 back last year. They still have Damian Pierce there for depth. Dario Gunbowale is an interesting pass-catching kind of back. I don't think either of these teams has incredible depth that you feel great about, but I like the offensive situation and the history and potential of Mixon a little bit better. So I have them at 6 and Jags at 7. You saw it the other way around, so why do you like the Jags a little more?
So for me, at this point in their careers, ETN is the better back. Mixon is going to be a workhorse. Damian Pierce can't run in that offense. I mean, the next time he finds the hole in a zone scheme will be the first time. And maybe that happens, and he's going into his third season, and maybe Pierce is able to kind of figure it out and develop that skill. Mixon, it's natural for. But ETN, I don't think he's threatened by Dearness Johnson or Tank Bigsby. They talk about, we want to get Tank involved. I don't recall a rookie running back having a worse run of luck than Tank Bigsby. I mean, it seemed like every time he touched the ball, it just popped up into a defender's hands. And he just, they'd run the ball 6 times with ETN, and he's not getting touched till he's 4 or 5 yards down the field. They bring in Bigsby to give him a blow. They hand it to him, and there's 3 guys 5 yards deep in the backfield tackling him. Things just didn't work last year for Tank Bigsby. Hopefully he has been able to rebuild his confidence. The team is saying all the right things. They're saying, look, we believe in his talent. We believe Tank Bigsby can be a contributor for us. And, they showed it by knocking him down from 2 to 3 on the depth chart. But I just believe more in Travis Etienne at this stage. Mixon is going to be 28 years old, I think. Etienne's 25, 24. And I still think the fresh legs of Etienne are what gives Jacksonville the edge for me.
You're right. Etienne is 25. Let's check Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's only 27. Don't sell him short.
But he's been in the league for 7 years.
Well, that part's true. You and I have the same team at 5, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get Arthur Smith. Should potentially be good for a run-heavy offense. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, pretty good dynamic duo up at the top, and then they have an interesting pickup in Cordero Patterson, who we've seen do things with Arthur Smith. That was enough for me to pop them up into the top 5.
Yeah, I honestly, I sat them at 5 and then spent, the next couple hours trying to find reasons to move them up ahead of Indianapolis and Cleveland. So Najee Harris is set up for fantasy gold. He has a run-heavy philosophy coordinator. He's in a contract year. I get it. Jalen Warren's there. They're bringing in some new quarterbacks that are going to need the stability of the running game. Unfortunately, just Najee Harris isn't better than Jonathan Taylor. And Najee Harris and Jalen Warren together aren't better than Jonathan Taylor. I think Cleveland, I've got them at 3. Cleveland got the edge over Indianapolis because even though Nick Chubb is coming off an injury, they showed last year they developed their depth with Jerome Ford. They brought in Deontay Foreman as a hedge. If Chubb looks good this preseason, wouldn't surprise me to see Foreman get cut. But we've seen Foreman, whenever he's called upon over the last, 2 or 3 seasons, he's going to go in there and he's going to produce for you. He's going to be effective in the passing game. He's a big back. He's quick enough and he's agile enough that he's going to be productive. Jerome Ford and who else Cleveland got there? Pierre Strong was the other guy.
Yeah, Nyheim Hines they brought in.
He's a special teamer. I don't really count him. He's not even a passing down back anymore. I almost feel like John Kelly would beat out Nyheim Hines, and Kelly isn't. He's just a preseason player, but it feels like he's been in Cleveland since 1973. But I like what's happening in Pittsburgh, and it's a running game that I'm willing to invest in this year, especially in redraft. Najee's, I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's playing for a contract. He felt like he should have got the 5th-year option, and that's how they climbed up over. And I think Jalen Warren is what gave them the edge over Travis Etienne and Joe Mixon in Jacksonville and Houston. I think they've got 2 capable starters, but if the other one went down, I'm not going to be worried.
So you mentioned you had Colts at 4 and Browns at 3. I have the same 2 teams, but in keeping with this latest section in a different order. The Browns definitely have better depth, and I've been a big fan of Nick Chubb, but there are some questions. This is not his first major knee injury to come back from. And so if he's not all the way back, or if he takes some time to get back, they don't have anything to me that even comes close to approaching what the Colts have in Jonathan Taylor. And I know the Colts don't quite have the depth. We don't know what we have in Evan Hull. We didn't really see him last year. Trey Sermon, looked good in the game that he appeared. Be curious about that. But that's not a lot that makes you feel confident. But honestly, at this time last year, you wouldn't have looked at them having Evan Hull and Zach Moss and said, well, that's going to be sufficient. I think with Taylor, with his contract worked out, with being back healthy, with hopefully having a full off season and being there with Anthony Richardson, that was enough for me to pull the Colts up to 3 over Cleveland. So that was a difference for me. And that leaves our top 2, and we have the same top 2, and we have them in the same order. And I feel like it's quintessential incredible depth versus incredible star power. And for both of us, it was star power that won out at number 1, being the Jets and Breece Hall, who's probably the best running back in the AFC right now, versus incredible depth, which is Miami, that, their running back 5, who may not even make the active roster, is Jeff Wilson, who last year, if you told me I was going to be starting Jeff Wilson for the Dolphins, I would have been happy in fantasy. But
I'm good with that.
Mostert, Achane, they got another speed burner in Jalen Wright, Salvon Ahmed. It doesn't matter who goes in. You want that Miami running back, and they have a great collection of running backs, both of our number 2.
So I listed them as a tie. For me at 1, I've got the star power of Breece Hall and the Jets and the depth of the Dolphins at 1 as well. It was too tough for me to pick, and maybe that's a cop out. For all appearances, it looks like the Jets are pretty down on Izzy Abanikanda. And so they went out and they drafted Braylon Allen in the 4th round and Isaiah Davis in the 5th round. And these are both 2 big backs. I mean, Braylon Allen, 3 years of college, and he's still just 20 years old. 6'1", 235-pounder. That isn't going to give you a ton of wiggle, and he's not explosive, but he is fast, and he's got good power. I don't know a ton about Isaiah Davis, but again, he's another big back. But neither one of them can hold a candle to what Breece Hall can do. Now, that's not to say if Hall goes out that one of them won't miraculously produce. But we've seen it in Miami that with their top 4 backs last year, Mostert, Achane, Ahmed, and Wilson, it just didn't matter which one of them was in the lineup. If they were going to get 15 to 20 touches, you were going to get a touchdown at least and 100 yards. And frankly, if one of them was going to get 15 to 20 touches and another one was going to get 8 to 10 touches, you're likely to get a touchdown and 100 yards out of both of them. And so now we're going in. They've added Jalen Wright, who looks like he's the Raheem Morris understudy. Morris, it feels like they're rewarding Morris for Mostert, excuse me. It feels like they're rewarding Mostert for being a team player. He's 31 or 32 years old. He's been a journeyman. He finally landed in an offense that can utilize him to the point that he looks phenomenal. I know he had some good runs in San Francisco, some good stretches of games. Mostert, the big thing is just, can he stay healthy? And last year he finally did. I'm not banking on it this year, and that's why we've got like 6 picks left in a startup dynasty draft, and I stunned Snake Eyes when I drafted. I was at the turn, I had the 2-3 turn, but it wasn't that turn. It was later in the draft. I drafted Mostert and Jalen Wright back to back. I took both of them. My thought was Mostert's my RB3 on that team now. And if he gets injured, I've already got Jalen Wright. And next year, we're probably looking at Jalen Wright being the starter with Mostert being gone. So, but then again, Salvon Ahmed. And then just for shits and giggles, they got Chris Brooks, who's a 230-pound bruiser, if they ever decide they want to play Smash Mouth.
Yeah, I mean, Miami, for a number of years in the draft, we kept thinking they were going to go take like one premier back, but that really is just not totally. Mike McDaniel, I think, better understands the old Mike Shanahan Denver Broncos running game system than even what we've seen. You know, Kyle did that for a while with San Francisco and then got Christian McCaffrey. And honestly, if you have Christian McCaffrey, that's what you're going to do. But that old Denver, you know, watching them in the 90s and early 2000s, it was a parade of guys you may never have heard of that just came in and rocked the system and produced. And it didn't matter that they, you know, and it really didn't matter. It was next man up. And
I got a Reuben Drones jersey. I mean, it's a Cleveland Browns Reuben Drones jersey, but he was one of those Shanahan guys.
Mike Anderson, Orlando Gary, CJ Anderson, Ronnie Hillman, rest in peace. You know, they had guys and they could just make, you know, the magic work. You know, Kubiak continued that when he was in there too. And it just, you know, the system is what kind of allows the running backs to thrive, and they've really done that. The twist Mike McDaniel puts on it that I really have enjoyed is he goes for speed.
Right.
You know, we've seen some pure speed.
Now, for me, I think I'm okay if you can make either argument, whether you want to argue depth of Miami or star power of Breece Hall. It just depends, honestly, in a draft, what you want to pay. Now, the downside of drafting the Miami guys is it isn't always sometimes it can get a little squirrely there. And, you know, they give somebody, you know, they take Mostert out for a few plays and somebody starts going off and they're like, all right, we're just going to leave him. Mm-hmm. Versus in New York, they may take Breece Hall out and Izzy Abanikanda breaks off, you know, 45 yards on 3 carries. Well, Breece Hall's still coming back in.
Well, and that's so you mentioned Abanikanda. The Jets beat writers seemed to indicate that there was a little frustration that he struggled in picking up blocking schemes and some of the rest of the offense last year, and that was part of the reason they went with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. I actually think Braylon Allen probably becomes the number 2 by the time everything starts. But it'll be interesting to see how they go. But Breece Hall, you don't really want him to come off the field. Remember last year at this time, you know, they still had Michael Carter. Hall was maybe coming back from injury. They didn't even seem sure, and they picked up Dalvin Cook, and it's like, well, this can be a dreadful committee. And after like the second week, it's like, no, they're never going to play Cook, and they're going to deal Carter, you know, because they don't need him.
Hey, I got some breaking news.
Yep.
Devontae Parker is retiring from the NFL.
Didn't he just sign with the Eagles this offseason?
He did.
Too?
He did.
So it's probably good for Paris Campbell, who also signed with the Eagles.
Did he?
Yeah.
I think it's good for Johnny Wilson.
Well, Devontae Parker didn't play tight end, so I don't know. Well, it's interesting. Devontae Parker, you know, he had a couple of great years there with Miami, but I think the Eagles will survive. The Eagles will probably survive.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us today. Looking at the running back rooms on Friday, we transition over to pass catchers. This is both receivers and tight ends, so keep that in mind. So you know,
thanks for the reminder.
The rise in tight end production, especially the last few years, gives a bump to a couple of these groups that maybe only have 1 or 1.5 great receivers. So it'll be interesting. We'll be looking at the NFC there, and then next week we'll finish with the AFC pass catchers, and then we'll be looking at power rankings. And, you know, after that, Dennis, it's actually time to start previewing these teams. So not too far away. But if you are looking for something to fill up the week, if you don't have graduation madness like Dennis and I, what can they do to fill that lonely hours?
Go to your favorite podcast platform. Type in. It's me typing on my phone. You know, the kids do it like this. There we go. Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Hit that like and that subscribe. Give us a rating and a review.
Well, we will see you guys again on Friday, provided that neither Dennis or I gets picked up to fill the holes in one of these AFC running back rooms. Until then, you guys have a wonderful evening.